What would you do if you discovered that the person you'd been treating like they were beneath you was actually one of the most qualified people you'd ever met? Victoria Sterling thought she knew exactly who her new maid was, just another servant to order around and look down upon. But when she overheard Amara quietly speaking perfect French, then flawless Italian, then fluent Mandarin, she had no idea she was about to face the most humiliating revelation of her privileged life. "She's the maid!" Victoria screamed as a room full of diplomats and professors stared in shock. "How was I supposed to know?" But sometimes the universe has a perfect way of teaching us that respect isn't about someone's job title, it's about their humanity. What happened next will leave you speechless and restore your faith in justice. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now. Subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. The grand marble foyer of the Sterling mansion gleamed under crystal chandeliers as Amara Johnson clutched her small suitcase, her worn shoes silent against the pristine floor. At 28, she carried herself with quiet dignity despite her circumstances. "You must be the new girl," came a sharp voice from the curved staircase. Victoria Sterling descended like royalty, her designer heels clucking authoritatively. Everything about her screamed wealth, from her perfectly styled blonde hair to her diamond bracelet that probably cost more than most people's annual salary. "Yes, ma'am, I'm Amara Johnson," she replied respectfully, extending her hand. Victoria glanced at the offered hand with obvious distaste, making no move to shake it. "I don't do handshakes with the helper. Elena will show you the rules." Elena Rodriguez, the head housekeeper, appeared from a side hallway. Her kind eyes met Amara's with understanding sympathy. "Come, Mija. Let me show you around." As they walked through the opulent rooms, Victoria's voice followed them. "I expect perfection, Johnson. No excuses, no shortcuts. You're here to clean, not to think or comment on anything you see or hear. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am. The previous girl lasted 2 weeks before I had to let her go. Incompetent. I hope you're not planning to disappoint me." Amara bit her tongue, focusing on Elena's whispered explanations of the household routine. The mansion was a testament to excesses, rooms filled with expensive art, imported furniture, and enough space to house several families. Later, while dusting the study, the phone rang. Without thinking, Amara answered. "Sterling residence. Oui, un moment s'il vous plaît." She covered the receiver. "Mrs. Sterling, there's a French gentleman asking about tomorrow's charity event." Victoria appeared in the doorway, her eyes narrowing. "Did you just say—" "I said there's someone calling about in French." "You spoke French?" Amara's heart skipped. "I just asked him to wait, ma'am." "Where exactly did a maid learn to speak French?" Victoria's tone was ice-cold, suspicious. I studied languages in school." Victoria's laugh was bitter. "I won't have the help embarrassing me with their attempts at sophistication." Elena caught Amara's eye and shook her head slightly, a warning. The Sterling family gathered for dinner in their palatial dining room, unaware that Amara was setting the table nearby. Marcus Sterling, Victoria's husband, was deep in conversation with his business partner about an upcoming deal with Italian investors. "The contract terms are complex," Marcus said, reviewing documents. "They're demanding changes, but I can't figure out exactly what they want. My translator won't be available until next week." Victoria barely looked up from her wine. "Just tell them to wait. These foreigners need to learn patience." Amara continued arranging silverware, her movements automatic while her mind processed the Italian phrases she'd overheard from Marcus's speakerphone call earlier. The investors weren't being demanding. There was a critical mistranslation in the contract that could cost Marcus millions. The Italian word entro meant within, not after, as his current translator had written. The deadline clause was completely reversed. "Dad, why are you so stressed about this?" James Sterling, their 16-year-old son, looked up from his phone. "Because I could lose a $15 million deal over a translation error," Marcus muttered. Amara hesitated, then quietly approached. "Excuse me, Mr. Sterling, I couldn't help but overhear. The Italian investors aren't trying to change your terms. There's a translation mistake in Clause 7. Entro il 30 November means by November 30th, not after November 30th. They're actually agreeing to your original timeline. The room went silent. Victoria's fork clattered against her plate. How dare you eavesdrop on my husband's private business? I wasn't eavesdropping, ma'am. You were just what? Standing there, pretending to understand Italian. Do you think we're stupid? Marcus frowned at the documents. Actually, Victoria, let me check this. He grabbed his phone and called his Italian contact. After a brief conversation in broken English and Italian, he hung up, stunned. She's right. The deadline clause was translated incorrectly. They've been trying to confirm they can meet our original deadline. Victoria's face flushed red. That's impossible. She's a maid. Mom, James said quietly, maybe you should... Don't you dare defend her, Victoria whirled on Amara. I don't know what game you're playing, but it stops now. You are here to clean, not to pretend you understand languages you clearly don't speak. From now on, you keep your mouth shut about anything that isn't directly related to your cleaning duties. One more outburst like this and you're gone. Marcus looked uncomfortable. Victoria, she just saved us millions. Victoria's monthly dinner party was in full swing, the dining room filled with the city's elite. Dr. Catherine Mills, a pompous linguistics professor from the local university, held court at one end of the table, bragging about her recent sabbatical in Europe. Of course, being fluent in French, Spanish, and German made my research so much more authentic, Dr. Mills declared, her voice carrying across the room. Most people simply can't appreciate the nuances of true multilingual scholarship. Victoria beamed with pride at her friend's accomplishments. Catherine is being modest. She's published papers in 3 languages. Not everyone can claim such intellectual sophistication. Amara moved silently between the guests, refilling wine glasses and clearing plates. Her invisible presence allowed her to observe the elaborate performance of wealth and state. The German guest, Herr Friedrich Wagner, leaned toward his companion and muttered in German, Mr. Betty's 10th verstehen sowieso mich. Man kann alles vor ihnen sagen. These servants don't understand anything anyway. You can say anything in front of them. His companion laughed. Ja, sie sind wie mobile. Wohlig und sichtbar und betoslos. Yeah, you know, completely invisible and meaningless. Amara's hand tightened imperceptibly on the wine bottle, but she continued serving without expression. Dr. Mills switched to French, addressing the table. Les domestiques américains sont si populciers. C'est Romain dommage. American dommage workers are so uncultured, it's really a shame. Indeed, Victoria agreed in English, not understanding but assuming it was a compliment about the evening. Elena, passing through the kitchen doorway, caught Amara's eye. She'd noticed the slight tension in Amara's shoulders, the way her movements had become more controlled. The evening continued with the guests growing more comfortable, their conversations becoming increasingly frank. They discussed their children's expensive private schools, complained about their various housekeepers, and made dismissive comments about people of her kind, assuming Amara couldn't understand. When Amara served coffee, Herr Wagner made another comment in German about how at least this one knows her place and stays quiet. Elena watched from the doorway as Amara's jaw tightened slightly, the only sign of her growing frustration. Catherine, you simply must tell everyone about your latest paper, Victoria gushed. Dr. Mills preened. Well, it's a comparative analysis of Romance language evolution. Quite complex. I doubt anyone here besides myself could truly appreciate the sophisticated linguistic frameworks involved. How fascinating, Victoria replied, though her glazed expression suggested otherwise. As the evening wound down and guests began leaving, Elena helped Amara clean up. They worked in silence until Victoria disappeared upstairs. You understood every word, didn't you, Mija? Elena whispered. Amara's silence was answer enough. Why do you let them treat you this way? Because I need this job, Amara replied quietly, stacking plates with mechanical precision. Sometimes survival means swallowing your pride. Elena studied her young colleague's face, seeing something that Victoria's arrogance had blinded her to. Intelligence, education, and a strength that ran far deeper than anyone in this house suspected. James Sterling sat at the kitchen table, his Spanish textbook spread before him, frustration written across his teenage face. His homework lay crumpled beside him, conjugation exercises that might as well have been hieroglyphics. Porque es tan difícil, he muttered, not realizing he'd spoken aloud. Amarara, cleaning nearby counters, glanced over. Because you're trying to memorize patterns instead of understanding the logic, she said softly. James looked up, surprised. You speak Spanish? A little. Amara hesitated, then moved closer. The subjunctive mood isn't as complicated as it seems. It's about expressing doubt, emotion, or hypothetical situations. Look, espero que tengas suerte means, I hope you have luck. The verb changes because it's expressing a wish, not a fact. James's eyes widened as understanding dawned. That actually makes sense. Can you explain the irregular verbs? Amara, Victoria's sharp voice cut through the kitchen like a blade. She stood in the doorway, her face twisted with rage. What exactly do you think you're doing? Mom, she was just helping with my homework. Amara straightened, maintaining her dignity. Mrs. Sterling, I was only— You were overstepping your boundaries. Again. Victoria's eyes blazed. First the Italian nonsense. Now you're pretending to be a Spanish teacher. What's next? Are you going to claim you have a degree in education too? Actually, ma'am, I do have university education. I studied— University education. You! Don't insult my intelligence. If you had an education, you'd be using it instead of cleaning my floors. Mom, please, James started. Be quiet, James. This woman is filling your head with lies. Victoria turned back to Amara, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Let me make something crystal clear. You are the maid, not a tutor, not a translator, not anything else. You clean, you serve, and you keep your mouth shut. If I catch you helping my son again, you'll be looking for a new job. Do I make myself clear? Yes, ma'am. And if you ever again claim to have a university education, you'll be gone that same day. I won't tolerate lies and delusions of grandeur from the help. Elena appeared in the doorway, having heard the commotion. Victoria, perhaps? Elena, take her upstairs and remind her what her actual job duties are. Clearly she'd forgotten. As Elena led Amara away, James remained at the table, his homework forgotten. For the first time, he was seeing his mother's cruelty clearly, and it made him sick. The woman who'd just been humiliated had understood his Spanish homework better than his expensive private tutor. That night, he found Amara in the laundry room. I'm sorry about my mom, he said quietly. Amara looked up from folding towels. It's not your fault, James. You really do have a university education, don't you? Amara was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes the truth doesn't matter as much as people's perceptions. That's not fair. No, she agreed softly. It's not. The morning started like any other until Marcus Sterling's panicked voice echoed through the mansion. Victoria, the Chen Industries contracts are missing from my study. Within minutes, the household was in chaos. The contracts represented a potential $50 million deal with Chinese investors, and the signed originals had vanished from Marcus's locked desk drawer. Victoria appeared at the top of the staircase, her robe flowing dramatically. Missing? How can important documents just disappear? I don't know. I locked them in my desk last night after reviewing them with my lawyer. Now they're gone. Dr. Catherine Mills, who had stayed overnight after the previous evening's dinner party, emerged from the guest room. Marcus, surely you don't think someone took them? Victoria's eyes immediately found Amara, who was quietly dusting the hallway. Someone did take them. The question is who had access to your study. The implication hung heavy in the air. Marcus frowned. Victoria, you can't be serious. Can't I? She's been here less than a month, and already she's been eavesdropping on business calls, pretending to understand languages, interfering with James's education. Now important documents disappear. Dr. Mills, you've studied criminal psychology. Isn't it true that people in desperate financial situations often resort to theft? Dr. Mills nodded gravely. Unfortunately, yes. The opportunity and motivation are certainly present here. Elena stepped forward. This is ridiculous. Amara would never steal anything. We need to search her room and belongings immediately. You want to search my room? Amara's voice remained steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. It's standard procedure, Dr. Mills added pompously. We can't simply take your word for it. People like you— Well, people like me— Amara's composure cracked slightly. People in service positions often develop resentment toward their employers. It's well documented. The search was thorough and degrading. Victoria and Dr. Mills went through Amara's few possessions with obvious satisfaction, as if expecting to find evidence of criminality hidden among her simple belongings. "Nothing here," Victoria said, sounding almost disappointed. "Perhaps she hid them elsewhere in the house," Dr. Mills suggested. "That's enough," Marcus finally exploded. "This is insane. We're treating an employee like a criminal based on absolutely no evidence." "Marcus, those contracts—" Victoria froze. I might have, but I put them back." "Did you? Because I just remembered you were carrying your purse when you went upstairs to say goodnight." With growing horror, Victoria retrieved her designer handbag. There, nestled between her wallet and cosmetics case, were the missing contracts. The silence was deafening. Marcus stared at his wife in disbelief. "They were in your purse the entire time." I forgot. I was tired, and—" "You accused her of theft. You searched her belongings. You humiliated her." Victoria's face flushed red, but instead of apologizing, her embarrassment transformed into defensive anger. "Well, how was I supposed to know? It was an honest mistake." She turned and walked away without a word of apology to Amara, leaving everyone standing in stunned silence. Dr. Mills cleared her throat awkwardly. "Well, these things happen." Elena put a protective arm around Amara's shoulders. "Come, Misha, let's get back to work." As they walked away, Amara's quiet dignity in the face of such injustice spoke louder than any words could have. The Sterling Mansion's grand ballroom glittered with crystal and gold for Victoria's annual charity fundraiser. The city's elite mingled beneath sparkling chandeliers, their designer gowns and tailored tuxedos creating a sea of affluence and self-importance. Amara moved through the crowd like a ghost, serving champagne in canopies while remaining invisible to the guests, who saw her as nothing more than part of the scenery. Victoria, resplendent in a diamond-encrusted gown, held court near the silent auction display. "Of course, we've raised over 200,000 tonight," she announced to her admirers. "It's so important to give back to those less fortunate." Dr. Mills nodded approvingly. "Your generosity is truly inspiring, Victoria." "Well, we all have a responsibility to help the disadvantaged," Victoria replied, her voice carrying across the room. People simply need guidance to know their proper place in society." As Amara passed with a tray of glasses, Victoria's voice grew louder, clearly intended for her to hear. "Take our household staff, for example. We provide steady employment, room and board. It's really quite charitable when you think about it." Several guests chuckled, and Amara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Of course," Victoria continued, "you have to be firm with them. Set clear boundaries. Some of them get ideas above their station if you're not careful." Dr. Mills laughed. "How true. I remember when my cleaning lady started offering opinions about my research. Can you imagine?" "Exactly." Victoria's eyes found Amara in the crowd. "Our current maid actually tried to convince us she has a university education." The delusion some people develop. The laughter was louder now, more cutting. Amara's hands trembled slightly as she served drinks, but she maintained her professional composure. "Mom," James appeared at Victoria's elbow, his young voice tight with embarrassment. "Can I talk to you?" "Not now, darling. I'm speaking with our guests. It's important." "James, don't interrupt. Just stop." His voice was louder now, drawing attention. "Just stop talking about Amara like that." The conversation around them quieted. Victoria's smile became strained. "James, we'll discuss this later." "No, we'll discuss it now." James's teenage voice cracked with emotion. "She's been nothing but kind to everyone in this house, and you treat her like garbage." "James Sterling, you will not speak to me that way." "Then don't give me a reason to." He turned to the crowd of guests. "You all think this is funny? Making fun of someone who works harder in one day than most of you work in a month?" The ballroom had gone silent. Every eye was on the family drama unfolding in front of them. "She helped me with my homework when I was struggling, and Mom accused her of overstepping. She prevented Dad from losing millions on a business deal, and Mom called her a liar. She's been accused of theft, humiliated, and treated like she's less than human, and she's never once been anything but dignified about it." Victoria's face was crimson with fury and embarrassment. "Go to your room, now!" "Gladly." James stormed toward the exit, but paused near Amara. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "You deserve so much better than this." The guests began murmuring among themselves, their entertainment having taken an uncomfortable turn. Victoria's perfect evening was crumbling around her. "Well," she said, forcing a brittle laugh. "Teenagers, you know how they get. So dramatic, but the damage was done." The guests were looking at her differently now, and at Amara too, seeing her perhaps for the first time as an actual person rather than a piece of furniture. Later that night, as Amara cleaned up the aftermath of the party, Elena found her in the kitchen, finally allowing her composure to crack. "I can't do this anymore, Elena. I've never been so humiliated in my life. Mihai, I know it's hard. Do you? Do you know what it's like to have people laugh at you for having an education, to be treated like you're lying about your own life?" Elena sat beside her. "No, I don't know exactly what that feels like, but I know you're stronger than Victoria Sterling could ever be. And soon, very soon, she's going to learn exactly who she's been dealing with." "What do you mean?" Elena smiled mysteriously. "Trust me, Miha. Sometimes the universe has a way of setting things right." The doorbell rang at precisely 9 a.m., its chimes echoing through the Sterling mansion's marble foyer. Amara hurried to answer, expecting a routine delivery, but instead found herself face to face with an impeccably dressed Asian gentleman flanked by two assistants. "Good morning. I am Ambassador Chen Wei from the Chinese embassy. I believe Mr. Sterling is expecting me." Amara's eyes widened. She knew this name, Chen Wei, was one of China's most influential trade ambassadors, and his visit could only mean one thing: the massive Chen Industries deal was moving forward. "Please, come in, Ambassador Chen. I'll inform Mr. Sterling immediately." Victoria appeared at the top of the staircase, her morning routine interrupted by the commotion. Upon seeing the distinguished visitors, she quickly descended, her demeanor shifting to performative charm. "Ambassador Chen, what an unexpected pleasure. Marcus didn't mention you were coming today." Ambassador Chen bowed slightly. "Forgive the short notice, Mrs. Sterling. There have been developments that require immediate attention. The Beijing board has accelerated our timeline significantly." Marcus emerged from his study, phone still pressed to his ear. "Yes, I understand the urgency, but our translator isn't available until—" "Ambassador Chen, I wasn't expecting you until next week. The circumstances have changed, Mr. Sterling. We need to finalize the contract negotiations today. Time is of the essence." Marcus's face paled. "Today? But our translator is in London, and the backup won't be available until— After that, the opportunity moves to our European partners." Victoria stepped forward with false confidence. "Surely basic English will suffice for a simple contract review?" Ambassador Chen's assistants exchanged glances. "Mrs. Sterling, with respect, this involves complex financial instruments, regulatory compliance across multiple jurisdictions, and cultural considerations that require precise linguistic accuracy. A misunderstanding could cost both parties millions." "Maybe we could reschedule," Marcus suggested desperately. "I'm afraid not. The board was very clear, today or not at all." The room fell silent. $50 million hanging in the balance, and no way to bridge the language barrier that stood between opportunity and failure. Amara, who had been standing quietly in the background listening to the exchange, took a deep breath. "Excuse me, Ambassador Chen. I couldn't help but overhear. I might be able to assist with the translation." Victoria whirled around. "Amara, don't be ridiculous." "Ninshuo Shomwen Ma," Ambassador Chen addressed Amara directly in Mandarin. "Shide wo shou luli shen ye hai no maro, don't be ye chi fi da. Who? I can also handle the technical terminology of business contracts." The ambassador's eyebrows rose in surprise, and he continued in rapid Mandarin, testing her comprehension with complex business terminology. Amara responded flawlessly, her pronunciation perfect, her understanding of nuanced commercial language evident. Marcus stared in shock. Victoria's mouth fell open. "Remarkable," Ambassador Chen said, switching back to English. "Your pronunciation is exceptionally refined. Where did you study?" "Various places," Amara replied modestly, not wanting to elaborate with Victoria watching. "Mrs. Sterling," the ambassador turned to Victoria, "your staff member appears quite qualified. Shall we proceed?" "Ah, yes, of course. If you think she's adequate." Ambassador Chen smiled. "I believe she will be more than adequate." The Sterling Mansion's formal conference room had been hastily converted into a negotiation space. Legal documents covered the mahogany table, and laptops hummed with activity as both sides prepared for the crucial discussions. Imara sat between Ambassador Chen and Marcus, her posture professional and confident, a stark contrast to her usual invisible presence in the household. Victoria watched from a corner chair, her expression a mixture of disbelief and barely contained anger. "Shall we begin with the regulatory compliance section?" Ambassador Chen suggested in Mandarin. "Dang rang ke yi rang wo men shen cha di tiao guan yi ji shi chan quan juan rang de tiao quan?" "Certainly. Let's review Section 7 regarding intellectual property transfers," Amara responded, then turned to Marcus. "The ambassador wants to start with the intellectual property clauses in Section 7. He's concerned about the patent sharing." For the next 2 hours, Amara facilitated complex negotiations with flawless precision. She didn't just translate words. She explained cultural context, clarified legal nuances, and helped both parties understand the deeper implications of each clause. "The ambassador is pointing out that the liability limitations in Section 12 are structured differently under Chinese commercial law," Amara explained to Marcus. "He's suggesting a modification that would actually benefit both parties by reducing regulatory oversight requirements." Marcus nodded, taking notes furiously. "Can you ask him about the timeline for regulatory approval in Beijing?" Amara posed the question in rapid Mandarin, then listened to Ambassador Chen's detailed response. "He says typically it takes 6 to 8 weeks, but because of the strategic nature of this partnership, he can expedite it to 3 weeks if we adjust the subsidiary structure as outlined in his proposal." Victoria watched in growing amazement and horror as the woman she'd dismissed as an ignorant maid conducted herself with the expertise of a seasoned international business translator. Ambassador Chen suddenly switched to Japanese, testing Amara again. "Konochiwe no jishu de na seimien ni tsuite do si imasu." "What do you think about the technical aspects of this contract with your—" Without missing a beat, Amara replied in perfect Japanese. "Jisu juan no chiyaoxian nayoku gu she sare taimasu ga, pinzi guan li no jijun ne tsuiori. Minke ni suru biyao garuka moshiremasen." The technology transfer clauses are very well structured, but we might need to be more specific about quality control standards. Ambassador Chen's face lit up with genuine admiration. "Once your Japanese is remarkable. What about Korean?" He switched languages again. "Ne hangugyo do hal subi subnida. Ajeyagezo hangug sijang jinku guanhan jo hangdu li tegu hirong mirop subnida." "Yes, I can speak Korean as well. The clauses about entering the Korean market in this contract are particularly interesting." Marcus stared at Amara as if seeing her for the first time. Victoria's face had gone completely white. "And Russian," Ambassador Chen continued his linguistic test. "Konechno, ia svobodno, govoriu po-ruski. Razdelov rabopishki partner as fak potrebium nemania kerose skimto govieni soglajeni." Ambassador Chen leaned back in his chair, clearly impressed. "Remarkable. In my 20 years of international business, I've rarely encountered such linguistic versatility. You speak at least 4 languages fluently, and with sophisticated commercial vocabulary. Where did you receive your training?" Amara glanced nervously at Victoria, whose face was now a mask of barely controlled rage. "I studied linguistics extensively, Ambassador." "At which institution?" The question hung in the air. Victoria's eyes were blazing, daring Amara to continue what she clearly considered an elaborate deception. "Oh, no, you don't," Amara said quietly. The silence that followed was deafening. Ambassador Chen nodded approvingly. "Oxford has an excellent linguistics program. I imagine you specialized in applied linguistics with a focus on commercial applications." "Actually, I completed my PhD in comparative linguistics with a concentration in East Asian languages and international commerce." Victoria shot to her feet. "I won't sit here and listen to these ridiculous lies." Ambassador Chen looked confused. "Mrs. Sterling, I'm afraid I don't understand." The ambassador looked at Amara with confusion and growing concern. "Is this true? Are you employed as domestic staff?" Amara met his gaze steadily. Yes, Ambassador, I am currently working as a housekeeper for the Sterling family. But your qualifications are quite real, she said simply. Sometimes circumstances require us to take positions that don't reflect our education or abilities. Ambassador Chen studied her face, then turned to Victoria. Mrs. Sterling, regardless of her current employment, this woman has just conducted one of the most sophisticated contract negotiations I've experienced. Her linguistic skills are exceptional, and her understanding of international commerce is doctorate level. Victoria's voice rose to near hysteria. You're all being fooled. She's a maid. A maid. The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The silence stretched until it was broken by the sound of the front door opening. Elena's voice could be heard in the foyer. Right this way, Professor. They're in the conference room. Victoria frowned. Elena, we're in an important meeting. No interruptions. But the conference room door opened anyway, and Elena entered with a distinguished elderly gentleman with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Professor Williams. Amara's face lit up with genuine joy and relief. My dear Amara, Professor Jonathan Williams, Oxford's Emeritus Chair of Comparative Linguistics, crossed the room with arms extended. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Your visa extension was approved, and I have wonderful news about the UNESCO position. Victoria's confident smirk began to falter as she watched the interaction between Amara and this clearly educated gentleman. Ambassador Chen stood and extended his hand. Professor Williams, I presume? I am Ambassador Chen Wei. Your timing is impeccable. We were just discussing Miss Johnson's impressive qualifications. Dr. Johnson, Professor Williams corrected gently. And yes, her qualifications are indeed impressive. She was one of Oxford's most brilliant linguistic students in decades. Dr. Mills, who had been silent throughout the morning's events, suddenly spoke up. I'm sorry, but this is impossible. I'm Dr. Catherine Mills from the university here, and I can assure you that someone in her position couldn't possibly have the credentials you're claiming. Professor Williams turned to her with polite confusion. I'm sorry, Dr. Mills, but I'm not familiar with your work. What's your field? Comparative literature with a linguistics minor, Dr. Mills replied proudly. Published papers in 3 languages. How nice, Professor Williams said kindly. Amara, Dr. Johnson, has published papers in 9 languages and is considered one of the world's leading experts in cross-cultural linguistic adaptation in commercial settings. Her doctoral dissertation on economic impact of translation accuracy in international trade is required reading in graduate programs across Europe. The room was dead silent. Dr. Mills looked as if she'd been slapped. 9 languages, Ambassador Chen asked with growing respect. Fluently, Professor Williams confirmed. Mandarin, Japanese, Korean, Russian, French, German, Spanish, Italian, and English, obviously. She also has conversational ability in Portuguese, Arabic, and Hindi. Victoria found her voice, though it came out as a strangled whisper. This is impossible. She's been working as our maid for over a month. Professor Williams looked at her with mild confusion. Yes, Elena explained the situation when she called me. Dr. Johnson's family faced an unexpected medical emergency that required immediate funds, and her student visa had expired while waiting for the work visa processing. She took temporary employment to support herself and her family while waiting for her legal status to be resolved. He turned to Amara with concern. My dear, why didn't you tell me how badly you were being treated? Elena was quite upset when she called. Marcus finally found his voice. Elena called you. Elena stepped forward, her expression stern. I couldn't watch this anymore. Dr. Johnson has been humiliated, accused of theft, treated like she was stupid, and made to endure insults that no human being should have to face. I thought it was time for the truth to come out. Ambassador Chen was studying Amara with new eyes. John Streen, I must ask, are you available for employment? The United Nations is looking for a senior linguistic consultant for our new international trade mediation program. The salary is quite substantial, and it would make full use of your remarkable abilities. Before Amara could answer, Victoria exploded. This is insane. You're all being manipulated. She's been lying to us for weeks. No, Victoria, Marcus said quietly, his voice filled with shame. We've been lying to ourselves. We saw only what we wanted to see, someone we could look down on, someone who made us feel superior. We never bothered to actually see her. Professor Williams looked around the room, taking in the tension and Victoria's obvious distress. I think I'm beginning to understand the situation here. Dr. Johnson, have you been subjected to discrimination based on your temporary employment status? Professor, please. Because if so, this is exactly the kind of case that the International Human Rights Commission would be very interested in, particularly when it involved someone of your academic standing being treated poorly due to racial and socioeconomic prejudice. Victoria's face went from red to pale in seconds. The threat of public exposure and legal consequences was suddenly very real. Ambassador Chen nodded gravely. Indeed, the United Nations takes a very dim view of the mistreatment of qualified professionals, especially when that mistreatment appears to be based on prejudice and assumptions. The room fell silent again, but this time the silence was heavy with the weight of consequences beginning to dawn on everyone present. The conference room felt like a courtroom, with Victoria Sterling standing trial in the eyes of everyone present. The weight of her months of cruelty toward Dr. Amara Jana hung heavy in the air, and there was nowhere left to hide. Marcus stared at his wife with a mixture of horror and disbelief. Victoria, do you understand what you've done? You've been systematically humiliating and abusing a woman with a PhD from Oxford, an internationally recognized expert in linguistics. I didn't know. Victoria started weakly. You didn't want to know. James Sterling burst into the room, having heard the raised voices. You never once asked about her background, her education, or treated her like a human being worthy of basic respect. Professor Williams watched the family dynamics with professional interest. Mrs. Sterling, in my 40 years in academia, I've encountered prejudice in many forms. But what Dr. Johnson has described to me, the systematic humiliation, the accusations of theft, the public mockery, this goes far beyond simple misunderstanding. Victoria's face crumpled. She was working as a maid. How was I supposed to know? By treating her with basic human dignity regardless of her job title? Elena said sharply. I've worked in service for 30 years and I've never been treated the way you treated her. Ambassador Chen cleared his throat. Mrs. Sterling, I must tell you that this incident will be reported to the appropriate authorities. The United Nations has strict policies about the treatment of international scholars, and Dr. Johnson's situation appears to meet several criteria for investigation. Investigation, Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. Discrimination in employment, harassment based on racial prejudice, and abuse of a temporary worker, Professor Williams explained clinically. The academic community takes these matters very seriously, particularly when they involve scholars of Dr. Johnson's caliber. Marcus turned to his wife, his voice filled with shame. Victoria, our marriage, our reputation, our place in this community, you've destroyed all of it with your arrogance and prejudice. But I apologized, Victoria said desperately. When? James asked. Did you apologize? Because I've watched you humiliate her for weeks, and I've never heard a single word of genuine remorse. Dr. Mills, who had been sitting in stunned silence, suddenly spoke up. I owe Dr. Johnson an apology as well. I made assumptions based on her employment status and spoke about her in ways that were completely inappropriate. I'm deeply ashamed of my behavior. She stood and faced Amara directly. Dr. Johnson, I was wrong, completely, utterly wrong. Your credentials far exceed my own, and I allowed my own insecurities and prejudices to cloud my judgment. I would be honored if you would consider a position at our university. We need someone of your expertise, and frankly, we need to learn from the example you've set in maintaining your dignity despite our shameful treatment. Amara nodded graciously. Thank you, Dr. Mills. I appreciate your honesty. Victoria looked around the room at the faces staring back at her husband's disgust, her son's disappointment, Elena's righteous anger, and the quiet dignity of the woman she had so badly wronged. How do you want from me? She whispered. I want you to understand, Amara said quietly, that every person deserves to be treated with basic respect, regardless of their job, their appearance, or your assumptions about their background. I want you to realize that your wealth and status don't give you the right to humiliate other human beings. And I want you to face consequences for your actions, Elena added. Real consequences that will prevent you from treating anyone else this way. Marcus nodded grimly. The board at my company has already heard rumors about what happened at the charity gala. James's outburst was recorded by several people, and the video has been circulating. Our social standing is already damaged beyond repair. Maybe that's a good thing, James said quietly. Maybe we need to learn what it's like to not have everyone kissing up to us because of money. Victoria looked at her son, really looked at him, and saw the mature young man he was becoming despite her influence. James, I'm so sorry you had to see me this way. I'm sorry it took me so long to speak up, he replied. But I'm not sorry people finally know who you really are. Professor Williams consulted his watch. Dr. Johnson, we should discuss your future plans. The UNESCO position I mentioned comes with a substantial salary, full diplomatic status, and the opportunity to travel the world using your remarkable skills to facilitate international cooperation. There's also my offer, Ambassador Chen added. The UN position Professor Williams mentioned would actually work perfectly with our trade mediation program. You could potentially hold both positions. Amara looked around the room at the faces watching her, some with shame, some with hope, some with respect. For the first time in months, she felt like herself again. I accept both offers, she said with quiet confidence, and I hope that what happened here today serves as a lesson for everyone about the importance of seeing people as individuals worthy of respect, not as stereotypes to be dismissed or abused. The room fell silent as the full weight of the morning's revelations settled over everyone present. 3 weeks later, the Sterling mansion felt like a different place entirely. The grand rooms that had once echoed with Victoria's imperious commands were now quiet, almost subdued, as the family grappled with the aftermath of their public disgrace. The society pages had been merciless. Socialite Victoria Sterling exposed for abuse of decorated scholar, read one headline. Millionaire's wife mistakes PhD for maid. Humillionaire's wife mistakes PhD for... The video of James's outburst at the charity gala had gone viral, with commentary about privilege, prejudice, and the treatment of domestic workers. Victoria sat in her bedroom, scrolling through her phone with trembling hands. Her social media accounts had been flooded with criticism. Former friends had distanced themselves. Charity boards had quietly asked her to step down, and invitations to social events had completely stopped arriving. A soft knock interrupted her wallowing. Come in, she called weakly. Elena entered, carrying a tea service. The dynamic between them had shifted dramatically. Elena no longer moved with the deference of an employee, but with the confidence of someone who held moral authority in the household. I brought you some tea, Elena said, setting the tray down. We need to talk. Victoria looked up, surprised by Elena's directness. About what? About what happens next. About whether you're going to spend the rest of your life feeling sorry for yourself, or whether you're going to do something meaningful with this experience. Meaningful. Victoria's laugh was bitter. My life is ruined, Elena. My marriage is hanging by a thread. My son barely speaks to me, and I'm a social pariah. What could possibly be meaningful about that? Elena sat down across from her. Dr. Johnson received the UNESCO appointment. She starts next month in Geneva, facilitating peace negotiations between countries that can't communicate effectively. She's going to use her gifts to help bring understanding between people who see each other as enemies. Victoria was quiet for a moment. She deserves that opportunity. Yes, she does. But here's what you might not realize. She asked me to give you something. Elena handed Victoria an envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. Dear Sterling, Victoria read aloud. I want you to know that I harbor no hatred toward you. What happened in your home was painful, but it has also taught me valuable lessons about resilience and the importance of standing up for human dignity. I hope that you too can learn from this experience and use it to become an advocate for treating all people with respect, regardless of their circumstances. Sincerely, Dr. Amara Johnson. Victoria's hands shook as she finished reading. She wants me to help others? She's giving you a chance at redemption, Elena said simply. The question is whether you're brave enough to take it. Before Victoria could respond, Marcus appeared in the doorway. The strain of the past weeks showed in his face, but there was also something else, a clarity that hadn't been there before. We need to talk about our marriage. Elena discreetly left them alone. I know what you're going to say, Victoria began, but Marcus held up his hand. I don't think you do. I've been doing a lot of thinking about the man I've become, the values I've allowed to govern our family. I'm ashamed of how I stood by and let you treat Dr. Johnson that way. I'm ashamed that it took our teenage son to show more moral courage than either of us. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. Marcus, I know I've made terrible mistakes. Yes, you have. But so have I. I've been complicit in creating a household where human beings could be treated as disposable, where we felt entitled to look down on others because of our wealth. He sat down beside her. I don't know if our marriage can survive this, Victoria, but I know that if it does, it has to be built on completely different foundations. We need to become people who deserve respect, not people who demand it because of our bank account. Victoria wiped her eyes. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we start over, not our marriage necessarily, but ourselves. I'm suggesting we take Dr. Johnson's advice and figure out how to use our privilege to help people instead of looking down on them. How do we even begin to do that? Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her a website. I've been researching scholarship programs for underprivileged students. I think we should establish the Dr. Amara Johnson Scholarship Fund for students from underrepresented communities who want to study linguistics and international relations. Victoria stared at the screen. You want to create a scholarship in her name? I want to make sure that brilliant young people like her don't have to work as maids to support their education, and I want our son to grow up seeing us as people who lift others up, not tear them down. For the first time in weeks, Victoria felt a spark of something that might have been hope. Do you think she would accept that? The scholarship being in her name? Only one way to find out, Marcus said. Elena has her contact information in Geneva. Victoria nodded slowly, and for the first time since the confrontation in the conference room she felt like there might be a path forward, not back to who she had been, but toward who she might become. 6 months later, the auditorium at Geneva's United Nations headquarters buzzed with quiet conversations in dozens of languages. Dr. Amara Johnson stood at the podium, elegant in her professional attire, addressing the International Council on Linguistic Cooperation. Effective communication, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall, is not just about translating words, it's about translating hearts, minds, and intentions. When we fail to truly hear each other, conflicts arise not from malice, but from misunderstanding. In the audience, Victoria Sterling sat quietly, taking notes. She looked differentless, polished, more genuine. The designer clothes had been replaced with simple, professional attire. The entitled expression had been replaced with one of genuine attention and respect. After the presentation, Victoria approached Amara hesitantly. Dr. Johnson, I'm not sure if you remember me, Mrs. Sterling. Amara's voice was warm but cautious. I heard about the scholarship fund. Thank you. It's the least we could do. Actually, it's nowhere near enough, but it's a start. Victoria's voice carried none of its former arrogance. I wanted to ask, would you be willing to be the keynote speaker at our first scholarship awards ceremony? The recipients specifically requested you. Amara studied Victoria's face, seeing genuine change there. How many scholarships will you be awarding? 50 this year, with plans to expand, all for students from underrepresented communities who want to study linguistics, international relations, or conflict resolution. Marcus and we've restructured our entire lives around this foundation. And how has that changed things for your family? Victoria's smile was rueful but genuine. James is proud of us for the first time in years. Our marriage is stronger because it's built on shared values now instead of shared bank accounts, and I've learned more about the world in the past 6 months than I learned in the previous 45 years. What do you mean? I've been volunteering at immigrant services centers, helping with translation and advocacy. Elena has been teaching me about the challenges faced by domestic workers. I'm taking classes in social justice and human rights. Victoria paused. I'm trying to become some worthy of forgiveness, even if I don't expect it. Amara was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Sterling, the most important lesson I learned from our experience is that people can change if they're willing to do the hard, not to humiliate yourself, but to help others recognize their own prejudices before they cause harm. Victoria nodded immediately. I've actually been thinking about writing a book about the experience. Elena thinks it could help other people in positions of privilege recognize their own blind spots. Elena would know, Amara said with a smile. She's one of the wisest people I've ever met. She's been helping me understand the difference between charity and justice, between helping people and empowering them. As they talked, Marcus and James approached. Both men looked genuinely pleased to see Amara again. "Dr. Johnson," Marcus extended his hand respectfully. "You look wonderful. Geneva clearly agrees with you." "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. I hear you've made some significant changes in your business practices as well. We're implementing fair wage policies across all our companies and creating pathways for advancement for all employees, regardless of their starting position. It's amazing how much talent we were overlooking when we only promoted people who looked like us or came from similar backgrounds." James, now 17 and more mature, stepped forward. "Dr. Johnson, I want you to know that video of me defending you at the charity gala is still my most proud moment. Standing up to my mom that night was the first time I felt like I was becoming the person I wanted to be." Amara reached out and squeezed his shoulder. "James, you showed more moral courage that night than most adults show in a lifetime. Your parents are lucky to have you." Victoria watched the interaction, her eyes bright with unshed. "Johnson, I know I can never undo the harm I caused you, but I hope someday you'll see that your grace in the face of my cruelty didn't just change my life. It's going to change the lives of hundreds of young people who will receive educational opportunities because of what you endured." Amara looked at the family standing before her, not the entitled, prejudiced people she had worked for, but individuals who had genuinely transformed themselves through hard work and honest self-reflection. "Mrs. Sterling," she said finally, "I'll speak at your ceremony. And I'll tell people that real change is possible when people are willing to confront their prejudices and do the hard work of becoming better human beings." As they parted ways, Victoria felt something she hadn't experienced in years: genuine peace. The road to redemption was long and would never truly end, but for the first time since that awful day in the conference room, she felt like she was walking it with purpose and hope. Dr. Amara Johnson returned to her office, where the walls were lined with certificates and awards recognizing her work in international diplomacy. But the conversation she'd just had reminded her that sometimes the most important victories happen not in grand diplomatic halls, but in the quiet moments when people choose to see each other's humanity. The story that had begun with prejudice and humiliation had become one of transformation and hope, proved that even the deepest wounds can heal when people are willing to do the hard work of justice and reconciliation. Dear friend, this story reminds us that every person we encounter carries their own unique gifts, struggles, and dignity that deserve our respect. Too often, we make assumptions about people based on their job, appearance, or circumstances, missing the opportunity to connect with remarkable human beings. Whether it's the housekeeper who speaks 9 languages, the janitor who's working on their entire family, everyone has a story worth honoring. Let's challenge ourselves to see beyond surface appearances and treat every person with the kindness and respect they deserve. If this story touched your heart and opened your mind, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our